A black teen who lost his father helped an elderly man with groceries. The next day, when a luxury car stopped at his house, his mother started crying after reading the letter inside. Marcus jolted awake at 5:30 a.m. to the sound of his mother's alarm clock buzzing through the thin walls of their small apartment. His eyes burned from lack of sleep, but he pushed himself out of bed anyway. The wooden floor creaked under his feet as he walked to the kitchen. "Morning, Mom," he said, finding her already dressed in her waitress uniform, counting crumpled bills at the kitchen table. Sarah Williams looked up, dark circles under her eyes. "Morning, baby. You didn't have to get up so early. Someone's got to make sure you eat breakfast," Marcus said, pulling eggs from the refrigerator. The light inside flickered, and he made a mental note to check if they had any spare bulbs. Sarah sighed, smoothing her graying hair. "Bills are tight this month." Again, Marcus cracked eggs into a pan, the sizzling filling their small kitchen. "I can pick up more hours at the market." Mr. Chun said he needs help with inventory. "You need to focus on school," Sarah said, but her voice lacked conviction. They both knew they needed the money. Marcus served the eggs on their chipped plates. "I could do both. My grades are fine. Fine isn't good enough for medical school." Sarah's voice softened. "That's still what you want, right?" "Yes, ma'am." Marcus sat down, his breakfast untouched. "And I'll get there. Just got to handle business first." Sarah reached across the table, squeezing his hand. "Your father should be here, helping us." Marcus pulled away, focusing on his food. "We're doing fine without him." The mention of his father hung in the air like smoke. Marcus shoveled eggs into his mouth, not tasting them. 6 years since James Williams walked out, and the wound still felt fresh. Sarah gathered her things, checking her watch. "I've got double shifts today. Don't wait up." "Be safe," Marcus called as she hurried out. He listened to her footsteps fade down the stairs, then quickly washed the dishes and got ready for school. His uniform shirt had a small tear near the collar. Marcus changed angles in the mirror, trying to make it less noticeable. The pants were too short, showing his ankles, but new ones would have to wait. The walk to school took 20 minutes. Marcus kept his head down, hands in his pockets, moving quickly through neighborhoods that got progressively nicer. Mountain View High School loomed ahead, all brick and spotless windows. "Hey, Marcus." Tyler Chun waved from his locker. "You coming to help Dad with inventory today?" "Yeah, after school." Marcus fist bumped his friend. "Need all the hours I can get. Must be nice not having to study all the time," said a voice behind them. Jason Reynolds stood there in his pristine uniform, smirking. "Some of us actually have to work for our future." Marcus's jaw tightened. "Some of us have to work, period. Whatever." Jason shouldered past them. "Guess poor people have different priorities." Tyler started forward, but Marcus grabbed his arm. "Not worth it. He's such a dick," Tyler muttered. "Doesn't matter." Marcus headed to class. Can't be late for Anderson's test. The morning dragged. Marcus fought to stay awake through chemistry, his head nodding despite his best efforts. The equations on the board blurred together. "Mr. Williams." Mrs. Anderson's sharp voice snapped him alert. "Perhaps you'd like to share the answer?" Marcus straightened. "The balanced equation is C6H12O6 plus 6O2, 6CO2 plus 6H2O. Mrs. Anderson's eyebrows rose. "Correct. Please try to look more engaged." During lunch, Marcus sat alone in the library, counting the money in his wallet. $237 saved so far. Not enough. Never enough. The afternoon classes passed in a haze. When the final bell rang, Marcus hurried to his locker. "Want to shoot some hoops?" Tyler asked. Marcus shook his head. "Got to work. Tomorrow, maybe?" The market was 6 blocks away. Marcus picked up his pace, checking his watch. Mr. Chun liked punctuality. The store's bell chimed as he entered. Mr. Chun looked up from the register. Marcus." "Good timing. We got new inventory in the back." Marcus dropped his backpack behind the counter and grabbed an apron. For the next few hours, he stocked shelves, helped customers, and updated inventory lists. His back ached from lifting boxes, but he didn't complain. The sun was setting when he heard a crash outside. Marcus looked through the window and saw an elderly white man struggling with several grocery bags, cans rolling across the sidewalk. Marcus hesitated. His mother's voice echoed in his head. Be careful who you help. People see a young black man approaching. They make assumptions. The security guard watched him from the corner, hand resting near his radio. The old man bent to retrieve a can, nearly losing his balance. Marcus took off his apron. "Mr. Chun, I'll be right back." Outside, Marcus approached slowly, hands visible. "Sir, would you like some help with those?" The elderly man looked up, startled. He had white hair and wore an expensive-looking blue sweater. His eyes studied Marcus for a moment. Marcus stayed where he was, heart pounding. He could feel the security guard's eyes on his back. Then the old man smiled, warm and genuine. "That would be very kind of you, young man." Marcus relaxed slightly and began gathering the scattered groceries. Marcus," he said, carefully placing cans back in bags. "Dr. Thompson," the man replied. "Though these days most people just call me Edward." Marcus noticed the man's hands trembling slightly as he gripped the bags. "Let me carry those for you, sir." "Which way are you headed?" "Just 2 blocks down," Dr. Thompson said. "But aren't you working?" "It's fine." Marcus glanced back at the store. Mr. Chin gave him a subtle nod through the window. As they walked, Marcus felt eyes following them. A man in a dark suit stood across the street, watching intently. Marcus shifted the bags, keeping his movements careful and deliberate. "You're very kind to help an old man," Dr. Thompson said. "It's nothing, sir." Marcus kept his voice polite, neutral. "Anyone would do the same." Dr. Thompson chuckled. "We both know that's not true." They walked in silence for a moment. Marcus noticed Dr. Thompson's pace was steady but slow, his breathing slightly labored. "Do you live around here?" Dr. Thompson asked. "A few blocks over," Marcus said vaguely. "With my mom?" "And what do you want to be when you grow up, Marcus?" The question caught him off guard. Most people didn't ask him that. "A doctor, sir." "But that's a long way off." Dr. Thompson's eyes sparkled with interest. "Is that so? What kind of doctor?" "Emergency medicine." Marcus adjusted the bags. "I want to help people when they need it most." They reached a beautiful brownstone with flowers in the windows. "This is me," Dr. Thompson said. "Would you mind bringing them inside?" Marcus hesitated. Going into a stranger's house wasn't smart, even a seemingly kind old man. Dr. Thompson must have sensed his uncertainty. "The door's unlocked. You can leave them just inside." Marcus nodded, following him up the steps. He placed the bags carefully in the entryway, trying not to stare at the elegant furnishings. "Thank you, Marcus." Dr. Thompson reached for his wallet. "No, sir, please." Marcus backed toward the door. "I was happy to help." Dr. Thompson studied him for a long moment. "The world needs more young men like you, Marcus." Marcus hurried back to the market, his heart racing. The security guard watched him re-enter, face unreadable. Mr. Chin was waiting. "Everything okay?" "Yes, sir." Marcus put his apron back on. "Just helping someone with their groceries." When Marcus finally got home that night, the apartment was dark and empty. He made a sandwich and ate it standing at the counter, tomorrow's homework spread out before him. His mother's words echoed in his head, "Be careful who you help." But as Marcus crawled into bed, exhausted, he couldn't regret his decision. Sometimes he thought you just had to trust your instincts and do what felt right. He fell asleep quickly, unaware that his simple act of kindness had set much bigger events in motion. The next morning, Marcus couldn't shake the memory of Dr. Thompson from his mind. He moved through his morning routine mechanically, making breakfast while his mother got ready for work. "You're quiet today," Sarah said, buttoning her uniform. "Everything okay at the market yesterday?" Marcus poured coffee into her travel mug. "Yeah, just helped an old man with his groceries." Sarah froze. "Marcus!" He was struggling, Mom. "What was I supposed to do?" "You're supposed to be careful." Sarah grabbed her purse. "People aren't always what they seem." He was a doctor. Or he used to be. Marcus handed her the coffee. "Dr. Thompson?" Sarah's expression softened slightly. "Just promise me you'll be careful." "Always am." Marcus hugged her goodbye, breathing in her familiar scent of drugstore perfume and coffee. After school, Marcus headed to the market again. Mr. Chin was outside, sweeping the sidewalk. "That man you helped yesterday," Mr. Chin said, leaning on his broom. "He came back this morning asking about you." Marcus's stomach tightened. "What did he want?" "Just asked if you worked here regularly." Mr. Chin studied Marcus's face. Said you were very polite. Before Marcus could respond, he spotted Dr. Thompson approaching the store, wearing a light jacket despite the warm afternoon. The man in the dark suit followed several paces behind. "Good afternoon, Marcus," Dr. Thompson called out cheerfully. "I was hoping to find you here." "Hello, sir." Marcus glanced at the man in the suit, who remained by the street corner, watching. "Would you mind walking with me? I'd like to talk to you about something." Dr. Thompson gestured down the street. "With your employer's permission, of course." Mr. Chin nodded. "Go ahead, Marcus. We're slow today anyway." They walked in silence for a moment, Dr. Thompson setting a leisurely pace. Marcus kept his hands visible, aware of the suited man following them. "That's James, my assistant," Dr. Thompson said, noticing Marcus's glances. "Don't mind him. He's overprotective. Why did you want to talk to me, sir?" Dr. Thompson stopped, turning to face Marcus. "I've been a doctor for over 40 years. Retired now, but I still keep my hand in things. Run a small foundation, mentor promising students." Marcus waited, heart beating faster. "Yesterday, when you helped me, you mentioned wanting to be a doctor." Dr. Thompson's eyes were kind, but evaluating. "Was that true? Or were you just being polite?" "It's true, sir." Marcus stood straighter. "Emergency medicine. But like I said, that's a long way off." "Why emergency medicine?" Marcus thought about his answer carefully. "Because that's when people need help most. When every second counts. When you can really make a difference." Dr. Thompson nodded slowly. "And how do you plan to get there?" "Work hard. Save money. Get scholarships." Marcus shrugged. "That's all I can do." "Your mother works 2 jobs?" "Yes, sir." "And you work at the market to help out?" "And other places when I can get hours." Marcus felt defensive suddenly. "We manage." They had reached Dr. Thompson's brownstone again. The old doctor paused on the steps. "Would you like to see my library, Marcus?" Marcus hesitated. The suited man, James, had moved closer. "It's quite safe," Dr. Thompson said gently. "James will be here, and I think you'll find it interesting." Against his better judgment, Marcus followed Dr. Thompson inside. The entryway opened into a grand living room, but Dr. Thompson led him past it to a smaller room at the back of the house. Marcus stopped in the doorway, stunned. Books lined every wall from floor to ceiling. A large desk dominated the center of the room, its surface covered with medical journals. "This is where I do most of my reading these days," Dr. Thompson said, watching Marcus's reaction. "Every medical textbook and journal you could need for your studies." Marcus moved closer to the shelves, reading titles. "Gray's Anatomy," he murmured. "Harrison's Principles of Internal Medicine." "You recognize them?" "I've read about them online." Marcus turned to Dr. Thompson. "Why are you showing me this?" Dr. Thompson sat heavily in a leather chair. "Because I recognize something in you, Marcus. The same thing I saw in myself at your age. Determination, drive, and most importantly, compassion." Marcus remained standing, uncertain. "Yesterday, you helped me without expecting anything in return. In fact, you refused payment." Dr. Thompson leaned forward. "Do you know how rare that is these days?" "It was the right thing to do," Marcus said simply. "Yes, it was." Dr. Thompson smiled. "And that's exactly why I want to help you." Marcus tensed. "I don't need charity, sir." "Good. Because that's not what I'm offering." Dr. Thompson gestured to the books. "I'm offering knowledge, guidance, a chance to learn from someone who's walked the path you want to take." "Why?" "Because talent should be nurtured, regardless of circumstances." Dr. Thompson's voice grew serious. "And because I've seen too many promising young people give up on their dreams because the obstacles seem too great." Marcus looked around the library again, his heart racing with possibility. "What exactly are you offering?" "Mentorship, access to my library, weekly discussions about medicine, ethics, whatever you want to learn." Dr. Thompson spread his hands. "No strings attached. You keep your job, your independence. This would be extra, on your own time." It seemed too good to be true. Marcus thought of his mother's warnings. "I need to talk to my mom first," he said finally. "Of course." Dr. Thompson stood slowly. "Bring her here if she'd like. Let her meet me, ask questions. I understand the need for caution." James appeared in the doorway. "Sir, your 4 o'clock appointment." "Ah, yes." Dr. Thompson reached into his pocket and handed Marcus a business card. Think about it. Talk to your mother. Call that number when you decide. Marcus studied the card. It was simple, elegant. Dr. Edward Thompson, M.D. Thompson Medical Foundation. I should get back to work, Marcus said, tucking the card carefully in his wallet. One more thing, Marcus. Dr. Thompson's voice stopped him at the door. Why did you really help me yesterday? Marcus met his eyes. Because you needed it, sir. That's all. Walking back to the market, Marcus felt James's eyes on him until he turned the corner. His mind raced with possibilities and doubts. Mr. Chen was waiting outside. Everything okay? I think so. Marcus tied his apron. Just unexpected. That night, Marcus waited until his mother got home from her late shift. Sarah kicked off her shoes with a groan, then noticed his expression. What's wrong? Marcus took out the business card. Remember that old man I helped? He wants to mentor me. Help me become a doctor. Sarah took the card, her hands trembling slightly. Tell me everything. Marcus explained about the library, the foundation, the offer of guidance. Sarah listened silently, her face unreadable. It sounds too good to be true, she said finally. That's what I thought. Marcus sat beside her on the couch. But Mom, you should see his library. All those books. It's like a dream. Sarah studied the card again. We need to be careful, baby. The world isn't always kind to boys like you. I know. Marcus touched her hand. But what if this is real? What if this is my chance? Sarah pulled him close, kissing his forehead. We'll figure it out together. Tomorrow's my day off. Maybe we should pay Dr. Thompson a visit. Marcus hugged her tight, hope and anxiety warring in his chest. Tomorrow would change everything, one way or another. The next morning started like any other until it didn't. Marcus was making breakfast when he heard his mother scream from the living room. Marcus! Sarah's voice shook. Come here now. He ran to the window where she stood. A black Mercedes sat idling outside their apartment building, its polished surface reflecting the early morning sun. That's him, Marcus said, recognizing James stepping out of the driver's seat in his crisp dark suit. That's Dr. Thompson's assistant. Sarah gripped the windowsill. What does he want? They watched James straighten his tie and walk purposefully toward their building. Moments later, a sharp knock echoed through their apartment. Marcus moved to answer it, but Sarah caught his arm. Let me? She opened the door cautiously. James stood in the hallway, his tall frame filling the doorway. Mrs. Williams? His voice was professionally neutral. I'm James Harrison, Dr. Thompson's personal assistant. May I come in? Sarah hesitated, then stepped aside. James entered, his expensive shoes silent on their worn carpet. Dr. Thompson asked me to deliver this. He produced a cream-colored envelope from his jacket. He wanted you to have it before your visit today. Sarah took the envelope with trembling hands. Marcus watched as she opened it, unfolding a letter written on heavy paper. Her eyes moved across the page. Suddenly, she pressed a hand to her mouth, tears spilling down her cheeks. Mom? Marcus moved closer. What's wrong? Sarah shook her head, unable to speak. She handed him the letter. Dear Mrs. Williams, I had the pleasure of meeting your son Marcus yesterday. His kindness in helping an old man with his groceries might seem a small thing to some, but it revealed a character that is increasingly rare in our world. Marcus told me of his dream to become a doctor. He also mentioned your sacrifices, working 2 jobs to keep your family afloat. As someone who came from similar circumstances, I recognize the strength this requires. I want to be clear. I am not offering charity. What I am offering is an opportunity for Marcus to learn, to grow, and to pursue his dream with guidance from someone who has walked this path. The Thompson Medical Foundation provides mentorship and educational support to promising students. We offer access to resources, guidance, and eventually scholarships from medical school to those who demonstrate both the ability and the dedication to succeed. I see that potential in Marcus. More importantly, I see the kind of compassion that makes a truly great doctor. I understand your caution. As a parent myself, I know the fear that comes with entrusting your child's future to others. That's why I want to meet with you personally to discuss this opportunity and answer any questions you may have. The Foundation's board has already approved an initial educational support package for Marcus, should you choose to accept. This would include full access to my medical library and study resources, weekly mentorship sessions, SAT preparation, support a monthly educational stipend of $1,000 to offset work hours so Marcus can focus more on his studies again. This is not charity. It is an investment in a promising young man who I believe will make an exceptional doctor someday. I look forward to meeting you. Sincerely, Edward Thompson M.D. Marcus lowered the letter, his hands shaking. Mom? Sarah wiped her eyes, turning to James. Is this real? Very real, Mrs. Williams. James's professional demeanor softened slightly. Dr. Thompson doesn't make offers like this lightly. In fact, he hasn't taken on a personal mentee in over 5 years. Sarah sank into a chair. $1,000 a month? The Foundation believes students shouldn't have to choose between supporting their families and pursuing their education. James produced another envelope. This contains the formal paperwork, should you decide to accept. Marcus stood frozen, the letter still in his hands. The amount of money seemed impossible. With $1,000 a month, his mother could quit her second job. He could cut back his hours at the market, have time to study. What's the catch? Sarah asked, her voice stronger now. No catch, Mrs. Williams. Marcus would be expected to maintain his grades, attend weekly mentorship sessions, and demonstrate continued commitment to his goals. James straightened his jacket. Dr. Thompson is available to meet with you this morning, if you'd like to discuss this further. Sarah looked at Marcus, who nodded slowly. Give us an hour to get ready, she said. Of course. James handed her a card. This is the address. I'll let Dr. Thompson know to expect you at 10. After James left, Sarah and Marcus sat in stunned silence, rereading the letter. Maybe we shouldn't go, Sarah said finally. It seems too good to be true. Marcus touched the letter's heavy paper. But what if it is true, Mom? What if this is real? Sarah studied her son's face. The hope there, the dream she'd watched him push aside so many times to help her pay bills. Get dressed, she said. Your good clothes? They spent the next hour preparing carefully. Marcus wore his church pants and a clean white shirt. Sarah put on her best dress, the one she saved for special occasions. The walk to Dr. Thompson's house felt surreal. Sarah gripped Marcus's hand like she used to when he was small. James was waiting outside the brownstone. He led them into the same library Marcus had visited yesterday. Dr. Thompson rose from his desk, smiling warmly. Mrs. Williams, I'm so glad you came. And Marcus, welcome back. Sarah straightened her shoulders. Dr. Thompson, I need to understand exactly what you're offering my son. Of course. Dr. Thompson gestured to the chairs. Please sit. Let's talk about Marcus's future. Marcus watched his mother and Dr. Thompson, his heart pounding. In this moment, everything could change. The morning light streamed through the library windows, illuminating the books that lined the walls. Books that held the knowledge he'd been dreaming of. Books that might, finally, be within his reach. 3 days later, Marcus stood in front of the Thompson Medical Foundation building, adjusting his tie for the 10th time. The glass doors reflected his nervous expression back at him. Ready? Sarah squeezed his shoulder. She'd taken a rare morning off for this. Marcus nodded, unable to speak. They'd spent the weekend reviewing the Foundation's paperwork, asking questions, and finally signing the mentorship agreement. Now it was real. James met them in the lobby, his shoes clicking on the marble floor. Dr. Thompson is waiting in his office. Follow me. They walked past framed medical diplomas and awards that lined the hallways. Marcus read some names as they passed. Harvard Medical School, Johns Hopkins, Mayo Clinic. Dr. Thompson's achievements, James explained, noticing Marcus's interest. 40 years of medical practice, research, and teaching. The hallway opened into a large office area where several people worked at desks. They all looked up as James led Marcus and Sarah through. His personal staff, James said quietly. Researchers, administrators, Foundation employees. Dr. Thompson's office door stood open. The room was smaller than Marcus expected, but warm and inviting. Bookshelves lined one wall. A large desk dominated the center, and comfortable chairs faced a window overlooking the city. Marcus, Sarah. Dr. Thompson rose from behind his desk, smiling. Welcome to my other workspace. Sarah gripped Marcus's hand tighter. It's very impressive. Please sit. Dr. Thompson gestured to the chairs. James, could you bring us some water? Once they were settled, Dr. Thompson leaned forward. Before we begin the formal mentorship, I'd like to understand more about you, Marcus. Your mother mentioned you've been working since you were 10. Marcus shifted in his chair. Just small jobs at first. Helping neighbors with yards, running errands. Then the market when I was old enough. And school? How do you manage both? I study during lunch breaks. After work. Whenever I can. Dr. Thompson nodded. Your last report card showed mostly B's with an A in biology. What interests you about that subject? It makes sense, Marcus said. How everything in the body works together. Like a machine, but more complex. And your work ethic? Where does that come from? Marcus glanced at his mother. Had to help out. After Dad left. Sarah squeezed his hand again. I understand. Dr. Thompson's voice softened. My own father abandoned us when I was 8. My mother worked 3 jobs to keep us afloat. Marcus looked up, surprised. That's partly why I started this foundation, Dr. Thompson continued. To help promising students who might otherwise never get the chance. He pressed a button on his desk. James, could you bring in the schedule and materials? James appeared with a folder and a laptop. Everything's ready, sir. Now, Dr. Thompson said, let's talk about what this mentorship will look like. He opened the folder, spreading out papers. We'll meet 3 times a week. Mondays and Wednesdays after school for medical study and discussions. Saturdays for hands-on learning, anatomy labs, medical simulations, hospital observations when possible. Marcus leaned forward, eyes wide. The educational stipend will be deposited monthly into an account we'll set up for you. This isn't pocket money, Marcus. It's to reduce your work hours so you can focus on studying. I understand, sir. Good. Dr. Thompson handed him the laptop. This is yours now. Preloaded with medical reference materials, study guides, and educational software. Marcus touched the sleek machine carefully. I can't. You can, and you will. Dr. Thompson's voice was firm. You can't become a doctor without proper tools. Sarah wiped tears from her eyes. This is too much. Mrs. Williams, Dr. Thompson turned to her. What I'm offering isn't charity. It's an investment. In 10 years, when Marcus is saving lives in an emergency room, that will be the return on this investment. A knock at the door interrupted them. A young woman in scrubs entered, carrying medical charts. Ah, perfect timing. Dr. Thompson smiled. Marcus, this is Dr. Chun, one of our foundation's recent success stories. She went through this same program 12 years ago. Dr. Chun shook Marcus's hand. Dr. Thompson mentioned you're interested in emergency medicine? Yes, ma'am. I'm doing my residency in the ER at Metropolitan. Maybe you'd like to shadow me sometime? Marcus's face lit up. Really? After you've completed some basic training, Dr. Thompson interjected. Safety protocols, medical ethics, patient confidentiality. Dr. Chin nodded. Of course. But when you're ready, come find me. We always need more good doctors in emergency medicine. After she left, Dr. Thompson turned back to Marcus. That's what this program can do. But it requires total commitment. Are you ready for that? Marcus sat straighter. Yes, sir. Good. Dr. Thompson handed him a schedule. We start tomorrow. 4 o'clock sharp. What about the market? Sarah asked. Mr. Chun, already taken care of, James said from the doorway. The foundation has arranged reduced hours with your employer. Weekends only, if you choose to continue. Marcus stared at the schedule in his hands. Tomorrow he'd begin learning about anatomy and physiology. Next week, medical terminology. The following month, basic clinical skills. One more thing, Dr. Thompson said. Your grades. B's are no longer acceptable. From now on, I expect nothing less than A's. You'll have the resources and support. I expect results. Yes, sir. Marcus's voice was firm. There will be tests, evaluations, progress reports. Dr. Thompson's eyes were serious. This isn't easy, Marcus. Many students wash out of our program. Are you absolutely certain this is what you want? Marcus thought about his mother's exhausted face after double shifts. About Jason's sneers at school. About his father walking away. I'm certain, he said. Dr. Thompson smiled. Then let's begin. They spent the next hour reviewing expectations, signing additional papers, setting up the laptop. Sarah asked questions about insurance, liability, supervision. James answered each concern patiently. When they finally left the office, Marcus felt dazed. The laptop bag hung heavy on his shoulder, a weight of responsibility and opportunity. Outside, Sarah hugged him tight. "I'm so proud of you, baby." Marcus watched the foundation building gleam in the sunlight. Tomorrow he'd return, not as a hopeful visitor, but as a student, a future doctor. "Thank you, Mom," he whispered. "For everything." Sarah straightened his tie one last time. "Now go make your dreams come true." Marcus arrived at the foundation exactly 10 minutes early the next day, his heart pounding against his ribs. The laptop felt heavy in his backpack, along with the new medical terminology textbook Dr. Thompson had given him. James met him in the lobby. "Dr. Thompson is finishing a call. We'll start in the study room today." The study room turned out to be a small classroom setup with 4 desks, anatomical models, and a whiteboard. A skeleton hung in one corner. "Meet your study partner," James said as a girl about Marcus's age looked up from one of the desks. "This is Lisa Chun, Dr. Chin's daughter?" Marcus asked, recognizing the resemblance. Lisa nodded. "Dad owns the market. Mom's the ER doctor you met. No pressure, right?" Her easy smile helped Marcus relax as he took the desk next to hers. "2 students?" he asked quietly. "Dr. Thompson only takes 2 minutes at a time," Lisa explained. "Says it's the only way to give proper attention. I started last month." Before Marcus could respond, Dr. Thompson entered, carrying a stack of papers. "Good afternoon." He set the papers down. "Lisa, how was your anatomy quiz?" 92%, she said. "Still mixing up some muscle groups?" "Keep reviewing." "Marcus." He turned to face him. "Ready to begin?" Marcus sat up straighter. "Yes, sir." "Good. We'll start with basics. Open your laptops to the anatomy software." For the next 2 hours, Dr. Thompson walked them through major body systems, questioning them constantly. Marcus's hand cramped from taking notes, but he didn't dare slow down. "The key to emergency medicine," Dr. Thompson said, "is understanding how everything connects. A problem in one system can cascade through the entire body." He pointed to the skeleton. "Name the major bones in the leg, Marcus." "Femur, tibia, fibula," Marcus recited. "Then the tarsals, metatarsals, and phalanges in the foot." "Good. Now, Lisa, what major arteries supply blood to those areas?" The questions continued rapid fire. Marcus felt his brain stretching to absorb everything. Finally, Dr. Thompson checked his watch. "That's enough for today. Review chapters 1 through 3 tonight. Quiz tomorrow." As they packed up, Lisa turned to Marcus. "Want to study together? The coffee shop downstairs is quiet." Marcus hesitated. "I should get home." "Your mother's working late today," James said from the doorway. "We checked her schedule. Take the time to study." Marcus wondered just how much the foundation knew about their lives. The coffee shop was small but comfortable. Lisa ordered for both of them, waving away Marcus's attempt to pay. "Foundation covers study sessions," she explained, including brain fuel. They spread their books across a corner table. Lisa was a patient study partner, explaining concepts Marcus struggled with. "How do you know all this already?" he asked after she detailed the cardiac cycle. "Mom's been prepping me since I could walk." Lisa sighed. "Sometimes I think I'm only here because of her." "Are you?" Marcus asked carefully. Lisa was quiet for a moment. "I don't want to be a doctor. Just maybe not emergency medicine like Mom." "What then?" "Pediatrics." She smiled. "Kids are more fun than adults." They studied until the sun started setting. Marcus's head felt stuffed with medical terms, but in a good way. "Same time tomorrow?" Lisa asked as they packed up. "Actually," Marcus checked his watch, "I need to stop by the market. Let your dad know I can still work weekends." "Come on then. I'll walk with you." The market was quiet when they arrived. Mr. Chin looked up from his newspaper. "Ah, the 2 future doctors," he called out. "How was your first day?" "Brain's about to explode," Marcus admitted. Mr. Chin laughed. "Wait until residency, my wife says." "This is nothing." He came around the counter. "Marcus, about your hours?" "I can still work weekends, sir." "I want to." "Good man." Mr. Chin nodded approvingly. "Lisa, take him to get some study snacks." "On the house." As they walked the aisles, Lisa grabbed energy drinks and protein bars. Dad does this for all the foundation students. Says we need to keep our strength up. There been many? Marcus asked. A few. Most wash out. Lisa's voice was matter-of-fact. Dr. Thompson's standards are tough. Marcus thought about the lengthy study schedule waiting at home. I won't wash out. No, Lisa studied him. I don't think you will. Later that night, Marcus sat at his kitchen table, textbooks spread around him. His mother found him there when she got home from her late shift. Baby, it's almost midnight, Sarah said, kissing his head. Just finishing the chapter. Marcus rubbed his eyes. How was work? Better. Sarah smiled. Gave notice at the diner today. One job's enough now. Thanks to that stipend. Marcus felt warmth spread through his chest. Already, things were changing. Mom, he said as she headed to bed. I'm going to make this work. I promise. Sarah's eyes shone with tears. I know you will, baby. I know you will. The next few weeks fell into a routine. School foundation classes, studying with Lisa, weekend shifts at the market. Marcus's grades began to improve as he applied the foundation's study methods to all his subjects. One Wednesday afternoon, Dr. Thompson called Marcus into his office before class. Your progress report, he said, sliding a paper across his desk. Marcus held his breath as he read. His test scores, attendance, participation, all marked exceeding expectations. The hospital board meets next month, Dr. Thompson continued. If you maintain this performance, we'll start arranging observation hours in the ER. Really? Marcus's heart leaped. Dr. Chin speaks highly of your potential. Dr. Thompson smiled. Don't let us down. No, sir. Never. That evening, studying with Lisa, Marcus couldn't stop grinning. Heard you're coming to the ER soon, she said. Mom's already planning your rotation schedule. Nervous? Terrified, Marcus admitted. But excited? Lisa bumped his shoulder. You'll do fine. Just remember, in the ER, book smarts aren't enough. You need instincts, like helping old men with groceries? Marcus joked. Exactly. Lisa grew serious. That's why Dr. Thompson chose you, you know. Not just because you're smart, but because you have good instincts. Marcus thought about that as he walked home. The street where he'd first met Dr. Thompson looked different now. Everything looked different. His phone buzzed. A text from his mother. Proud of you, baby. Always. Marcus smiled, picking up his pace. He had 3 chapters to review before bed. The market was unusually busy for a Saturday morning. Marcus stocked shelves while keeping one eye on his medical terminology flashcards propped against a box of cereal. Tachycardia, he muttered. Rapid heart rate. Bradycardia, slow heart rate. Arrhythmia. Studying even here. Mr. Chin appeared beside him. Lisa says you're top of the class now. Marcus ducked his head, embarrassed. Just trying to keep up, sir. A crash from the front of the store interrupted them. Marcus rushed forward to find an elderly woman sprawled on the floor, groceries scattered around her. Someone call 911, a customer shouted. Marcus knelt beside the woman, his training kicking in. Ma'am, can you hear me? Her eyes fluttered open. What happened? You fell. Try not to move. Marcus checked her pulse. Rapid but steady. Are you experiencing any pain? The woman tried to sit up. Just dizzy, blood sugar, maybe. Are you diabetic? Marcus asked, noting her pale, clammy skin. Yes, forgot my morning dose. Marcus turned to Mr. Chen. Orange juice, quick. And something with sugar. While they waited for the ambulance, Marcus kept the woman talking, monitoring her vital signs like Dr. Thompson had taught them. He noticed a familiar figure watching from the door. Dr. Chun still in her hospital scrubs. The paramedics arrived minutes later. Marcus gave them a clear, concise report. Elderly female, diabetic, possible hypoglycemic episode. No loss of consciousness. Pulse rapid but regular. Skin pale and diaphoretic. Responsive to oral glucose. One paramedic raised his eyebrows. You a medical student? Not yet, Marcus said. Just learning. After the ambulance left, Dr. Chen approached him. Nice work. Clean assessment. Appropriate intervention. Thank you, ma'am. Marcus started gathering the scattered groceries. Ready for your first ER rotation next week? Marcus straightened. Really? Dr. Thompson approved it. Dr. Chin smiled. 8 hours, next Saturday. Think you can handle it? Yes, ma'am. Good. Now get back to studying. I'll be quizzing you. The week crawled by. Marcus spent every spare moment reviewing protocols and procedures. Lisa helped him prepare, sharing stories from her own first rotation. Just remember, she said during their Thursday study session, observe first, ask questions later. And stay out of the way when things get crazy. Finally, Saturday arrived. Marcus stood outside Metropolitan Hospital at 6 a.m. sharp, wearing the scrubs the foundation had provided. His hand shook slightly as he pinned on his student ID badge. Dr. Chen met him in the ER staff room. Ready? Saturday mornings are usually quiet. A trauma alert blared overhead. Or not. She grabbed a gown. Stay close. Observe only. The next 8 hours were a blur of activity. Marcus watched doctors and nurses work seamlessly together, treating everything from broken bones to heart attacks. Dr. Chen explained procedures when she could, quizzing him between patients. During a rare quiet moment, she handed him a coffee. Still want to be an ER doctor? More than ever, Marcus said without hesitation. Good answer. Now tell me the signs of acute appendicitis. As his shift ended, an elderly man was wheeled in, disoriented and struggling to breathe. Pulse ox dropping, a nurse called out. O2 sat 85%. Marcus watched Dr. Chen work, remembering their lessons. Decreased oxygen saturation, confusion, labored breathing, pulmonary embolism, he whispered. Dr. Chen shot him an approving look. Good catch. What's the immediate treatment? Oxygen, blood thinners, possibly clot-busting drugs, depending on severity. Very good. Now go home and get some rest. You've earned it. Marcus practically floated out of the hospital. On the street, he spotted a familiar black Mercedes. How was it? Dr. Thompson asked through the open window. Amazing, sir. Thank you. Don't thank me. You earned this. Dr. Thompson smiled. Need a ride home? During the drive, Marcus excitedly recounted everything he'd seen. Dr. Thompson listened, occasionally asking pointed questions about procedures and diagnoses. Your mother must be proud, he said as they neared Marcus's apartment. She is? Marcus paused. Dr. Thompson? Why did you really choose me? There must be smarter students. Intelligence isn't everything in medicine, Marcus. I chose you because when you saw someone in need, your first instinct was to help. Dr. Thompson's voice grew serious. That's something you can't teach. At home, Marcus found his mother waiting with dinner. How was it? Sarah asked, serving his favorite lasagna. Marcus described the day again, watching his mother's eyes shine with pride. I knew you could do it, she said. Ever since you were little, always taking care of people. A knock interrupted them. James stood in the doorway, holding a package. Dr. Thompson asked me to deliver this. Inside, Marcus found a brand new stethoscope and a note for next Saturday. Keep making us proud. Sarah touched the gleaming instrument. Your father should see you now. Doesn't matter, Marcus said firmly. I got here without him. Later that night, Marcus sat at his desk, reviewing his notes from the ER. The stethoscope hung around his neck, its weight unfamiliar but right. His phone buzzed with a text from Lisa. Mom says you crushed it today. Knew you would. Marcus smiled, turning back to his books. One step closer to his dream. 6 months into the mentorship program, Marcus sat in Dr. Thompson's library, struggling to focus on his cardiology notes. His mind kept drifting to the morning's events at school. Your attention is elsewhere today, Dr. Thompson observed, setting down his coffee cup. Sorry, sir. Just tired. Marcus. Dr. Thompson's voice was firm. We don't lie to each other here. Marcus sighed, closing his textbook. Jason Reynolds, this kid at school. He's been saying things about why you chose me for the program. What kind of things? That it's just for publicity. A diversity program. Marcus stared at his hands. That I didn't earn it? I see. Dr. Thompson leaned back. And what do you think? I know I earned it, Marcus said quickly. It's just difficult to hear, Dr. Thompson finished. Did I ever tell you about my first year of medical school? Marcus shook his head. 1965, Harvard Medical. I was one of 3 black students in my class. Dr. Thompson's eyes grew distant. Every day, someone suggested I was there because of quotas, not merit. What did you do? Graduated top of my class. Dr. Thompson smiled. Success is the best response to prejudice. Before Marcus could respond, James burst into the library. Sir, you need to come quickly. You're not feeling well? Dr. Thompson waved him off. Just a headache. But as he stood, his face went pale. Marcus jumped up as the older man swayed. Sir, Dr. Thompson collapsed before Marcus could reach him. Training kicked in immediately. Call 911. Marcus knelt beside his mentor, checking vital signs. Dr. Thompson, can you hear me? Pulse rapid and irregular. Breathing labored. Skin cold and clammy. James was already on the phone with emergency services. Marcus heard him giving their address. Stay with me, sir, Marcus said firmly, loosening Dr. Thompson's tie. Help is coming. The next few minutes felt like hours. Marcus monitored Dr. Thompson's pulse, noting every change. When the paramedics arrived, he gave them a precise report. Sudden onset collapse, pulse irregular, possible cardiac event. No prior history of heart problems that I know of. You his grandson? One paramedic asked. Student, Marcus corrected. He's my mentor. They loaded Dr. Thompson into the ambulance. James put a hand on Marcus's shoulder. I'll drive you to the hospital. The emergency room was chaos. Dr. Chun met them at the entrance, already briefed on the situation. Good work with the initial assessment, she told Marcus. Now wait here. I'll update you when I can. Marcus paced the waiting room. His phone buzzed. Lisa. Just heard. Coming now. She arrived 20 minutes later, face worried. Any news? Marcus shook his head. Both teenagers sat in tense silence. Hours passed. Other foundation staff arrived. Marcus called his mother, who promised to come after her shift. Finally, Dr. Chun emerged, looking tired but relieved. Minor stroke, she announced. We caught it early thanks to Marcus's quick response. He's stabilized and asking for you. Dr. Thompson looked small in the hospital bed, monitors beeping steadily around him. He smiled weakly when Marcus entered. There's my star pupil. You scared us, sir. Marcus's voice cracked. Good practice, though, wasn't it? Dr. Thompson tried to joke. How was my student, Dr. Chun? Textbook perfect response, she said. You trained him well. Dr. Thompson reached for Marcus's hand. No, he was already good. I just pointed him in the right direction. Over the next few days, Marcus split his time between school, the foundation, and the hospital. Dr. Thompson insisted their lessons continue from his room. Illness is an excellent teaching opportunity, he said, making Marcus list stroke symptoms and treatments. A week after the stroke, Dr. Thompson was released to home care. The foundation arranged for nurses, but he demanded Marcus continue his regular visits. Your education doesn't stop because I'm temporarily inconvenienced. Marcus arrived one afternoon to find Dr. Thompson sitting in his library, looking more like himself. Good news, his mentor said. The board reviewed your emergency response. They're implementing a new scholarship in your name. My name? Marcus stared. The Marcus Williams Emergency Medicine Scholarship. For students who demonstrate exceptional clinical instincts under pressure. Marcus sank into a chair. Sir, I don't deserve. You do? Dr. Thompson's voice was firm. What you did that day, that wasn't just training. That was instinct, compassion, and quick thinking. Exactly what we need in emergency medicine. But Jason was right. People will think. People will think what they choose to think. Dr. Thompson leaned forward. But facts are facts. You saved my life that day. Not because you're black, not because you're in this program, but because you're an excellent student with natural medical instincts. Marcus felt tears threatening. Thank you, sir. No, Marcus. Thank you. Dr. Thompson smiled. Now, shall we review stroke protocols? I believe I'm an excellent case study. That evening, Marcus found his mother waiting up for him. Dr. Thompson told me about the scholarship, she said, hugging him tight. Your father was wrong about you, baby. So wrong. Mom. Marcus hugged her back. We did this together. All of it. Sarah wiped her eyes. No, baby. You did this. I just watched you fly. Later, lying in bed, Marcus's phone lit up with a text from Lisa. Dad says you're setting the curve too high for the rest of us. Keep it up. Marcus smiled, touching the stethoscope on his nightstand. One crisis handled, one step closer to his dream. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new lessons. But tonight, he let himself feel proud. Not of the scholarship or the praise, but of knowing that when it mattered most, his instincts had been right. Dr. Thompson was alive because Marcus had been there, been prepared, been ready. That was worth more than any award. BP 140/90, heart rate elevated but regular, Marcus reported, wrapping the blood pressure cuff around Mr. Chen's arm. How long have you had the headache, sir? It was Saturday morning at the market, but instead of stocking shelves, Marcus found himself conducting an impromptu health check. Mr. Chen had mentioned feeling unwell, and Marcus's medical instincts had immediately kicked in. 3 days, Mr. Chen admitted. Lisa's mother already lectured me about waiting so long, and she was right. Marcus frowned. You should get checked out properly. My star employee turned doctor, Mr. Chen chuckled. Who would have thought? The bell above the door chimed. Dr. Thompson walked in, moving slower than before his stroke but steady on his feet. Practicing medicine without a license? He asked, eyes twinkling. Just a friendly checkup, sir. Marcus packed away the blood pressure cuff, a gift from the foundation. Mr. Chen needs to visit the ER. Indeed he does. Dr. Thompson turned to Mr. Chen. I'll drive you myself. Can't have Lisa mad at both of us. As they left, Marcus heard Dr. Thompson say quietly, You should be proud. That boy's going to be an exceptional doctor. The rest of Marcus's shift flew by. Between customers, he studied for next week's anatomy final. His grades had stayed perfect since starting the program. He couldn't slip now. Marcus? The security guard, Officer Jenkins, approached the counter. Got a minute? Yes, sir. My daughter, she's been having these migraines. The doctors keep dismissing it. Jenkins twisted his hat in his hands. Could you maybe take a look? Like you did for Mr. Chin? Marcus felt a surge of pride mixed with caution. I'm not a doctor yet, sir, but I can listen and maybe point you in the right direction. He spent his lunch break talking with Jenkins about his daughter's symptoms, suggesting questions to ask at her next appointment. You're good at this, Jenkins said. Real good. Sorry I ever doubted you. Ancient history, Marcus smiled, remembering the guard's suspicious looks from months ago. After work, Marcus headed to the foundation. They were hosting a community health fair, and he'd volunteered to help. The foundation's parking lot had been transformed. Tents offered free health screenings, medical information, and basic care. Dr. Chun supervised the team, performing blood pressure checks. There's my best student. Dr. Thompson called from his booth. Come help me demonstrate proper wound care. For the next few hours, Marcus assisted with demonstrations, answered questions, and helped elderly visitors navigate the fair. He noticed Lisa taking blood pressure readings like a pro. Just like old times, she said during a break. Remember learning vitals together? Feels like years ago, Marcus replied. Not months. Time flies when you're saving lives. She bumped his shoulder. Speaking of which, Mom says you're ready for more ER rotations. Before Marcus could respond, a commotion erupted near the entrance. A woman had collapsed, clutching her chest. Marcus reached her first. Ma'am, can you hear me? Pulse thready, breathing rapid. He recognized the signs. Possible cardiac event. He called out. Need a crash cart. Dr. Chin appeared with equipment. Together, they stabilized the woman until an ambulance arrived. Perfect response, Dr. Chun said later. Again, Marcus watched the ambulance drive away, adrenaline still pumping. This was what he was meant to do. The fair wound down as evening approached. Dr. Thompson gathered everyone for an announcement. Today showed exactly why this foundation exists, he said, to nurture the next generation of medical professionals who will serve this community. He gestured to Marcus. Some of you may remember this young man from less happy circumstances, when he helped save my life. Today you saw him potentially save another. Marcus felt his face heat up as people applauded. The Marcus Williams Scholarship will ensure others like him get their chance. Dr. Thompson continued. because talent and compassion deserve to be nurtured, regardless of circumstances. Later, as they cleaned up, Marcus found a letter in his bag. His hands trembled as he recognized the medical school logo. "Open it," Lisa urged, appearing beside him. "Not yet," Marcus said. "Want to wait for Mom? Then let's get you home." Sarah was waiting on their apartment steps. "Well?" Marcus pulled out the letter. Together, they read the words that would change everything. "Dear Mr. Williams, we are pleased to inform you of your early acceptance." Sarah's scream of joy echoed through the neighborhood. Marcus felt tears rolling down his face. "You did it, baby!" Sarah hugged him tight. "You really did it." "We did it, Mom," Marcus whispered. Together, his phone buzzed, messages flooding in from Dr. Thompson, the Chin's foundation staff. News traveled fast. That night, Marcus couldn't sleep. He stood at his window, looking at the street where it all began. One act of kindness, one moment of trust. Tomorrow he'd go back to work, back to studying, back to chasing his dream. But tonight, he let himself feel the full weight of how far he'd come. From a boy helping with groceries to a future emergency room doctor. From struggling to survive to thriving with purpose. His stethoscope caught the moonlight, and Marcus smiled. The journey wasn't over. In many ways, it was just beginning. But now he knew, without doubt, that he was on the right path. The Foundation's main hall buzzed with excitement. Chairs filled with community members, medical professionals, and students faced a small stage. Banners announcing the Marcus Williams Scholarship Fund launch hung on the walls. Marcus stood backstage, adjusting his tie for the 100th time. His mother's careful pressing had kept his suit crisp, despite his nervous fidgeting. "Ready?" Lisa appeared beside him in a blue dress. "Dad's already crying, and nothing's even started yet." Terrified, Marcus admitted, "What if I mess up the speech?" "You won't." She squeezed his hand. "Just tell them your story." Dr. Thompson approached, walking with his new cane, but standing straight. "Almost time, son." The word son hit Marcus hard. Over the past year, this man had become more than a mentor. "I don't know how to thank you," Marcus began. "Then don't." Dr. Thompson smiled. "Just pay it forward. That's all I've ever asked." James appeared with a clipboard. "We're ready." Marcus peeked through the curtain. His mother sat in the front row, wearing the new dress he'd bought with his market savings. Mr. Chun and his wife sat beside her, along with Officer Jenkins and his daughter. Now migraine-free thanks to the specialist Dr. Thompson had recommended. The ceremony began with Foundation board members discussing the program's impact. Dr. Thompson took the stage to introduce the new scholarship. "A year ago," he said, "a young man helped an old doctor with his groceries. That simple act of kindness revealed character essential to medicine, compassion, quick thinking, and natural instinct for helping others." Marcus felt tears threatening as Dr. Thompson continued. "That young man went on to save my life during a stroke. He's provided emergency care at our health fair, mentored other students, and maintained perfect grades while working to support his family." Dr. Thompson gestured backstage. "Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Marcus Williams." The applause felt surreal as Marcus walked to the podium. He saw his mother crying, Lisa giving him a thumbs up, Mr. Chun beaming with pride. "Thank you," Marcus began, his voice steady despite his pounding heart. "A year ago, I stood in this building for the first time, terrified but hopeful. I had a dream of becoming a doctor, but no clear path to get there." He looked at Dr. Thompson. "One person's belief in me changed everything. Not through charity, but through opportunity, through mentorship, guidance, and trust." Marcus turned to the audience. "This scholarship isn't just about money for medical school. It's about recognizing that talent can come from anywhere, that circumstances don't define potential, that sometimes all it takes is one person willing to open a door." He saw Sarah wiping her eyes, her smile radiant with pride. "To the future recipients of this scholarship, I say this: work hard. Stay humble. Remember why you chose medicine, not for prestige or money, but to help others. And when you succeed, reach back and help the next person in line." Marcus's voice grew stronger. To Dr. Thompson and the Foundation, Thank you for seeing me. Not as a charity case or a diversity statistic, but as a student with potential. Thanks to you, I start medical school this fall with a full scholarship. He paused, emotion threatening to overwhelm him. But more importantly, I start with purpose, with confidence, with the knowledge that I belong in those hallways and classrooms. To my mother, Marcus turned to Sarah, who worked endless double shifts to keep food on our table, who never let me give up on my dreams, even when they seemed impossible. This is for you, Mom. Sarah sobbed openly now, clutching Mr. Chen's hand. And finally, Marcus straightened his shoulders. To every kid out there who thinks their dreams are too big, who feels trapped by circumstances beyond their control, don't give up. Work hard. Help others. Your moment will come. The applause was deafening. Dr. Thompson embraced Marcus as he left the stage, whispering, "Perfectly done, son." The reception afterward was a blur of congratulations and well wishes. Marcus found himself surrounded by people wanting to share their own stories of struggle and success. "You've started something special, Dr. Chen told him, hugging him tight. The ER won't know what hit it when you arrive." Finally, the crowd thinned. Marcus stood with his mother, Dr. Thompson, and the Chens looking at the scholarship banner. "I remember that first day," Sarah said softly, "when James brought the letter. I was so scared it was too good to be true. And now?" Dr. Thompson asked. "Now I know miracles happen." She hugged Marcus. "Sometimes they just need a little help." Lisa appeared with cake. "Speech was great, but can we eat now? Some of us are stress-hungry." They laughed, the tension breaking. As they ate, Marcus looked around at this unlikely family he'd found. His mother, radiant with pride. Dr. Thompson, the father figure who'd changed everything. The Chens who'd supported him from the start. Lisa, his study partner and friend. "Penny for your thoughts?" Dr. Thompson asked. "Just..." Marcus gestured to the room. "A year ago, I was helping you with groceries. Now you're helping others." Dr. Thompson smiled. Full circle. Later that night, Marcus sat in his room, surrounded by medical school acceptance letters and scholarship offers. His stethoscope hung on the wall beside his first perfect anatomy test. His phone buzzed with a message from Lisa. "Ready for the next chapter, Dr. Williams?" Marcus smiled, touching the stethoscope. He thought about the scholarship recipients to come, the lives he'd helped change, the patients he'd treat someday. "Ready?" he texted back. In the living room, he heard his mother humming as she got ready for bed. One job now. Reasonable hours, pride replacing exhaustion. Marcus looked out his window at the street where it all began. One old man with groceries. One boy willing to help. One moment that changed everything. Tomorrow would bring new challenges. Medical school loomed ahead, full of possibilities and responsibilities. But tonight, Marcus Williams, future doctor, scholarship namesake, son of Sarah Williams, mentee of Dr. Thompson, knew exactly who he was and where he was going. And it all started with groceries.